I was blown away. There are always people who watch Marvel movies, or really movies in general, that may criticize the actions of the characters. With Batman, the criticism is about his moral code, and how it impedes his work and causes more harm. For others, it could be what reasonably makes a character as flawed as they are. Maybe it doesn't make sense, or maybe people just clash with the person so much it could be hard to understand them. Now picture what it would be like to actually talk to one of those characters and have all the answers. The discomfort, the character growth, and the conversation itself would be very intense, because you're judging their whole life, something they don't even know yet. Loki manages to take this idea and executes it flawlessly, to the point that I was left speechless during some of its scenes. The scene where Loki and Mobius are discussing his life was so heavy and powerful. The way he tries to get Loki to admit what he already knows to be true and using his entire life to prove it was stunning. It was so powerful. The denial, grief, and dread he experiences are seen easily in the performance alone when he is confronted with his future failures. The death of his mother and father, for example. And near the end, when he finally has started to be redeemed, his life was ended. The one line in this conversation between the two of them that really got to me is how he describes Loki. He talked about how important he was, that his destiny was to rule, but Mobius tells him his only purpose was to lose, so that everyone else can be better for it. Every single wall Loki put up between himself and the world around him is gone. He was nothing he strived to be. All of this is a great setup for a story like this. After seeing how he failed during his life, and seeing who he would have become at the end, he now truly does have an opportunity to choose his path. A big theme introduced in this episode is control. At every chance he gets, Loki tries to find a way for him to still be in control, to justify the mindset he's had for most of his life. But in the mundane 70s aesthetic TVA, he's brought down a peg every time. The TVA is such a fascinating adaptation of the Keepers of Time idea. They have a very boring way of life despite their job being so fantastical. Many of the people there work in a cubicle and file paperwork all day. Another great moment I love was when Mobius and Loki are walking out of the courtroom. They're walking down a hallway, and you can see out into the city. Loki remarks after seeing how beautiful and crazy it looks that he thought this place didn't have magic, and Mobius responds that it doesn't. Aside from setting up the conflicts of the story, the best thing a first episode can do is really show where the main character is mentally. Loki is at a low point, and I'm guessing his development will be a big focal point of the series. Also, the ability to make a boring office environment interesting has to be commended. The scene that showed a lot of Infinity Stones in a drawer was really funny. Honestly, that applies to this entire episode. The comedy here was relentlessly on point. The one thing the MCU TV shows do very well is they each have a very different style from the movies. Many of the movies are criticized for having too much of the same type of comedy, which is warranted, but Loki has such an interesting dry humor type style. It reminds me of a more upbeat version of Shin Godzilla or Doctor Strangelove. In terms of the writing specifically, the one aspect that really stood out to me was the progression throughout this episode. Loki starts off just like how he was in the first Avengers, and as the episode goes on, you can see his change happening in real time. As he goes from signing papers to waiting in lines, the more you can see his god complex persona fall apart. At first, he is super confused, and refuses to believe that the environment he is stuck in is one he has no control over. All of this culminates when he returns to the room he was questioned in, and starts to admit his own faults. There were also some really interesting bits of world building and philosophy, but I'll wait for more episodes to come out before tackling them. Overall, this episode speaks for itself. I feel like every moment is worth its time on screen, and you should definitely check it out, but I'd love to know what moments stood out for you in the episode, so let me know in the comments below. I'm definitely going to be covering this series a couple more times, so subscribe so you don't miss those uploads. I hope to see you next time.